on this episode.
There's a lot of discussion that the flag was waved.
So you're going to tell me they didn't have the ability to take shitty video?
With the cooperation of the U.S. government and NASA and the fake moon landing,
Kind of replicating what it would be like to be in zero gravity.
this could all be fake.
I just find it hard to believe that they couldn't take some shitty video.
100% of all of that original data is gone. In 1969, the world watched in awe as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took their historic steps on the lunar surface, a moment that was hailed as a pinnacle of human achievement. But almost immediately, whispers began to circulate, whispers that suggested that this monumental event might not have been what it seemed. Tonight, we'll explore the intriguing possibility that the moon landings, celebrated globally as a triumph of technology and human spirit, were in fact an elaborate hoax orchestrated by NASA and the US government. We'll uncover the origin of these claims, the alleged photographic and video anomalies, and the theories that filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick may have been involved in staging this grand illusion. As we sip our cocktails and dive into the shadows of skepticism, we'll examine the evidence that has kept this conspiracy alive for decades. From the mysterious behavior of the American flag to the perplexing absence of stars in the lunar sky, we'll dissect arguments that have convinced many that the moon landing was nothing more than a Cold War propaganda stunt. And don't worry, we'll also address the counter-arguments that debunk these theories, scrutinizing the scientific explanations that reaffirm the authenticity of the Apollo missions. But tonight, we let the scales of doubt tip as we entertain the possibility that everything we thought we might know be built on a lunar lie. So get comfortable, pour yourself a drink, and join us as we journey through the cosmos of conspiracy. Whether you believe the moon landing or suspect it's a masterpiece of deception, tonight's episode is sure to leave you questioning the narrative we've been told. We are the Conspiracy Realists. My name is Shane Skwarek, and I'm joined here by my host, as always, Mr. Philipps. And I feel like it is getting louder and stronger each time, to your wish. Cheers,
More
Mr.
emboldened.
Philipps. It's more emboldening. That's what we got to go
CNC.
for. You told me you wanted a full event of me just screaming Mr. Philipps. I'm working my way there. It is definitely getting bolder. That's going to be it. It's going to be the episode will just be titled Mr. Philipps. It'll be 60 minutes of me just saying Mr. Philipps. It'll
be the best and worst one. I like it.
Yeah, it's good perspective there. I'm not going to lie.
CNC, let's go. Moon landing, baby.
Let's go, moon landing. So this is an interesting one for me because much like when we tackled the 9/11 conspiracy theory, moon landing has never been one that's crossed my mind that it could be fake. I've always assumed it's always been real. I'm very big into science. Growing up, very big into astronomy and just the concept of the universe at this grand scale. But there's a lot of people that don't necessarily agree with that think, and I think this dates back even to 1969, that there was some skepticism if we landed there. But I think that's picked up a lot of steam as of late. Where have you stood on the moon landing?
So I think similar to 9/11, right? It's one of those theories that people get a little touchy about because it was like a great achievement by our nation. And people get a little touchy when you start to talk about that stuff. I feel like Flat Earth is a big religious one that people freak out about. 9/11, don't have to say much more about that. And this one is, people get a little freaked out when you talk about it. I'd say kind of growing up, I never thought about it, ever. As I got older and just became more interested in conspiracy and mystery in general, I had heard about it, and dude, I've watched like at this point probably countless documentaries or videos and things of that nature on it. I don't know. I watched too much shit. I couldn't sit there and recite all the details of it. I'd say at this point I'm at least 50-50. I'm at least 50-50, I'd say.
I'm big on that mute button. Every time I try to do something, I always hit
Love
that thing.
that mute button. It's a good thing you know how to
I
edit
love
shit.
that mute button. You know what? Maybe we'll just leave that in for the people
Fuck
out
it.
there.
Keep it in. Who cares?
So one of the big things about the moon landing, I think you nailed it on the head, is whenever there's a major event and it influences people's lives, good or bad, and they're part of that event in some way, I think that that really does distort their field of view on what's true and what's not true, and allows a lot of those holes that can be poked into the official story kind of just get washed away and maybe blurred into the picture. For
Yeah.
us, of course, yeah, 9/11, we had two great back-to-back episodes with Richard Gage, and we went into that in pretty good depth. But for the generation before us, you've got the moon landing, you've got JFK, and both of those sort of followed that same path. Is
Those are like two
neither
of the
of
top
these
two events that happened, right? And we talk about the last
right?
century. Those are the top two events that happened. Maybe you lump Vietnam and World War II in there. Like those four events are like the four real big ones. So to your point,
They're
it's
massive.
right.
And they influence everybody's life. Like you can always ask, and I remember they said this with 9/11 for us, is
Right.
you'll always remember where you were when it happened. People say that
Exactly.
with JFK, they say it with the moon landing, they tell stories of listening to it or seeing it, if they were able to see it on television at that point, which most just kind of listen to it. And so I
But
think
did
that's,
they?
but did they? And so that's what we're kind of getting into it now. There's a lot of evidence out there, I think, in for and against, and I think I want to kind of dive into some of that. But perhaps the most perplexing to me, and this is how I want to start everything out, is I'm going to pull up a video of the moon landing. And I'm not going to play everything here. I'm going to probably skim through it a little bit because it's quite a long video. I mean, there's 3 hours worth of footage here from the video I have here. But I'm going to play some bits and pieces. I'm going to jump around. I just want you to listen for now, and I just want you to kind of take it in. For anybody that's actually listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast provider, or perhaps it's on Spotify, bear with us. I'll try to give you some context on what's actually happening. Beyond that, oh, I didn't mean to turn that guy on already. And then anyone that's on, on YouTube, you'll obviously be able to see this. So let's find our correct page here. That's why it doesn't want me to select Chrome. So let's go to here. All right. So what I've got up here is our old trusty friend, YouTube. And we're going to start with this video right here. Okay. This is just our regular moon landing.
Looks like it's coming out nice and evenly. Okay, it's quite dark here in the shadow. It's a little hard for me to see it. I have good footing.
Can you hear that
I
all?
worked my way over into the
It's tough to hear it.
idea without
Okay.
looking directly into the sun.
So
Not that it's not that the audio, just the audio quality in general is tough to hear. Nothing to do with what we're
it's
doing.
terrible. Yeah. So what we're basically looking at right now is, I'm just going to lower the volume a tad. What we're basically looking at is, those initial moments of coming down, and we're seeing our astronauts now stepping on the moon. We're seeing them jump around and just sort of feel it out a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit. I mean, by all intents and purposes, we don't know much else, but this looks like it could be real. You see a little bounce there in the camera. Maybe in the lander, it looks like it's moving a little bit. Okay. Now we're coming up. I'm not exactly sure what we're doing here. All right, so now this is where it starts to get interesting. So now we've got some panoramic shots. We're kind of moving the camera around a little bit.
Columbia, this is Houston, over.
Okay. Now we see our astronauts moving around a little bit more.
Roger, I got a B-22 auto update.
So what they're doing, now we've got a perspective of the actual moon lander, and we see our astronauts walking around the moon lander itself. And, if we jump forward a little bit more, we're going to see a lot of the same stuff.
We
Okay, I'm going to stop that.
Okay.
Now, the reason I wanted to share that, hard to fake something like that, right? You land on the moon. There's really no benchmark of what the moon is at this point. All we know is that it is, more or less a ball of dust that's floating out in outer space. It's probably pretty dark out there. There's not much of an atmosphere, and you can bounce around a little bit. And there are some sections in that video where they hop around and jump up and down and whatnot. I'm sure I
Yeah.
can find it in one of these other videos. Skimming around in a 3-hour video isn't exactly the easiest way to do that, but
Yeah, but if anybody wants to check it out, I mean, there's countless, pieces of footage on any platform you want.
endless
You can
amounts of
find them.
videos. Yep.
Right.
Yep. So coming into this, and the reason I really wanted to pick this as a topic was because I saw a question posed on Twitter that changed my perspective immediately. I didn't know initially how to answer this, and I might be getting completely ignorant here. Is my question to you: who took that video?
That's a good question. So, all right. So did you ever see? Oh, I'm gonna botch the name of the show. It was a show on Discovery. It was one of the survival shows. Oh my god, I can't even remember the guy's name right now, and I love this show. It'll come to me at some point. There's a show on Discovery, one of those channels, where this guy survives. Oh, Survivor Man, it's called Survivor Man. Les Stroud
Okay.
is the guy's name. Boom, I knew it was coming to me. So when this guy films this show, he films it completely by himself. It's a fantastic show. So every shot that you see, he has to walk and set up the camera and then like walk up that trail again and so forth and so on. You get that? So my guess would be that they, came out of the lunar, lander or whatever you want to call it, whatever it's officially called, and they set up these television cameras and then that's how they did that. And so that the first time they're actually exiting the vehicle wasn't actually the first time, because they came down earlier and set everything up, and then kind of there was a bit of pageantry, if you will, the second time they came down for the public and for the whole world. That's the only way I could envision you being able to do it, right? Because there's nobody else on the fucking moon to sit there and capture video of you.
Right. And so I think that's been the prevailing theory. And that question is really one that struck me, because you have to have two schools of thoughts. It was either the first steps on the moon or it was not. It was the second. And if it was the first steps on the moon, how did they take that video? Now,
Doesn't
I think
make any
exiting
sense.
the lander can be explained away by sticking a camera outside of the pod, or maybe that was already mounted there, and so on and so forth. Setting up the camera separately, though, strikes me as a little bit more interesting. We're professional podcasters now, so this is up our skill set. Let's say we're going to go and we're going to do a live podcast, which we've talked about before. How comfortable do you think you are setting up that camera, pressing record, and going and doing your thing and making sure you're in the frame of shot? And I'm not talking about your cell phone camera where you got a big old screen that shows you. I'm talking
Right,
about an
right.
old school camera that you've got to peer down inside of a lens and set that shot, and then plant it in the ground on a tripod. And then every action you make is within that shot. Are you comfortable doing that?
No, that's a really good point. That's a very good point. Look, it's not out of the realm of possibility that could have been what occurred, but to your point, it's much more difficult than what you would think right off the top of your head. We're not talking about
And
modern day technology, right? Granted, I don't know what they used. I don't know what it looked like. I don't know how it operated. But I can guarantee you it was not nearly as easy to use as what we have today.
why wouldn't you think you'd feel comfortable setting that up?
Because I'm not an expert in how to utilize that piece of technology, right? It's
not a
not within
videographer,
my
right?
expertise. I'm not a videographer.
Right. Right.
And while astronauts are quite intelligent, they're not videographers.
And that's what sort of struck me then too, is was there training specifically on setting up a video camera? Because this is now something that is going to be monumental in Earth's existence, right? In
Right.
all humankind. How would that process have been set up? And how is there space for that kind of equipment on this lunar lander? And so combining all of these thoughts at that particular time is what sort of started to cast a little bit of doubt on me. Now, you mentioned briefly about flat Earth before. I've always said that the flat Earth theory, and we're not going to dive into flat Earth today. It's not a topic for this conversation, but I've always avoided the moon landing in part because I said the one constant that stops you from ever believing that flat Earth is real. Everything is null and void about flat Earth. No argument is true unless you think the moon landing is false. I've never thought the moon landing is false. Again, that's fascination by astronomy. That is just infatuation with the universe, and the idea of space travel to me is remarkable. And it's not like we haven't been to space or lower orbit or to some degree, again, maybe it's all conspiracy as well, but I think for the most part, I would believe that we have been. In 1969, I don't know. And so it was always tough for me to kind of reconcile that, because then once that is disproven, that sort of unlocks a lot of questions about everything else that's come after that. I want to try to look up here what a production studio video camera looked like in the 1960s. And part of the reason I want to do massive. That is part of the reason I wanted to do that. So a television studio camera that is going to be capable of capturing something that is this monumental at that particular period of time. Just an example of the 1960s, and this is a quick Google search, so I'm not saying that I'm an expert here, but my assumption is it would look very similar to something like this.
Right.
Again, you are setting up a tripod, you are setting up a massive camera, you are setting up a lot of other things that people in photography would know. Aperture, brightness, the contrast. There are a lot of settings that even on our own phone digital cameras, it becomes very difficult to set up.
Yeah.
In that period of time, again, it is not like pulling out your cell phone, setting it up, and clicking a button and it's tracking. You're looking down the nozzle here.
Well, dude, I challenge anybody to go buy one of those nice, like, Canon cameras, right? Those DSLRs, and really, like, go out and just fucking use it and take beautiful photos with it. Like, you're not going to do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's research involved in how to use these things.
Right. And that's today. That's 2024 technology. Those cameras are extraordinarily difficult. You can spend $4,000 on a camera. Doesn't mean you're going to take good pictures with it. Right. There's a lot that goes into it. And so that to me is where I wanted to kind of kick this discussion off, is around the cameras. That to me has been the most glaring piece to misunderstand. And I say that because when you look back at that footage, and I'm going to pull it up one more time here. Okay. And we're just going to bring our screen up one more time. And we're going to look back at that footage. There's a distinct difference. I'm just going to keep it muted at this particular time. Look at how the camera is set up right here. Look at the picture quality that's coming in right here, right? This is where it looks like it's against a lunar lander. And this is where I think it could be a real camera that's attached to the lander. But then what happens is it comes into focus. Okay, so maybe they did focus that one. But what happens when you jump away is the picture looks dramatically different to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, looking at this right now, it looks like shit.
Right. But look.
And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just an observation.
Right. Exactly. But look at I don't want to see even the quality, but the framing on here, like there's no distortion. It just looks dramatically different. It does look like somebody's is fixing the camera right there, because then you get a little more clarity. But when you jump a little bit later, it looks like a different picture almost, right? Different camera, it does. Perhaps.
Look, it could be just a different camera, but it looks the quality, everything about it looks drastically different.
Now, how would you surmise that a camera that looks like this is fitting inside this lunar lander, where maybe they have this much space and this much space up here?
That's a good point. Can you pull up, you don't have to do it right this second, but could we grab a photo of what the actual lunar lander looks like? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not in that video, that way we get more of a clear picture of it. Because I'll tell you what, and like I said, I've watched countless things about the moon landing possibly being faked and so on and so forth, but I never thought about the size of the camera and could they even fit it in there. Like, that's a really interesting point of view. Yeah, so, I mean, to the untrained eye, right, it's tough to tell exactly what is what on this thing, right? And I'd say that 99% of people taking a look at that couldn't tell you what's what, right?
It's hard to tell.
It's tough to tell, right? So if you look, it almost looks like there's two pieces, right? So there's like a top.
Right.
It almost looks like a
Right.
treehouse. As stupid as that sounds, it looks like a treehouse, right? It looks like
This is
like
where
there's
I'm
a
inclined
bottom.
to think they were coming out of. Yeah.
Right,
And their
exactly.
equipment was stored down here. Which again is
Yeah.
not to say that something wasn't latched onto there, but
Not to say that it wasn't.
I find it a little harder to buy that was attached to there. So that's kind of what I wanted to use to kick off. A lot of the other hoax stuff comes down to there's no stars in the sky. Easily proven or disproven. Can you go outside and take a picture right now? You're going to get any stars? That's not really done much to me. It doesn't mean anything.
The only thing with that, though, and I've never even thought about this before, this is a thought off the top of my head. I mean, you're talking about what should be zero light pollution, right? Like, why?
True. Zero atmosphere. Yeah.
Again, I don't know. Would it be great to have an astronaut on or somebody who knows a lot more about this, right? Would it be typical to be able to view many stars from the surface of the moon?
Right.
My stupid brain tells me, I should be able to see a lot of them. I don't know. I could be really wrong, but I would think you'd be able to see stars pretty easily.
So again, what I'm gonna reference back to those same cameras, right? And the counter evidence that I read, which totally makes sense. Again, like if you were to take your video camera and put it outside in a starry night, cameras are set to a fast exposure to capture the bright lunar surface and the astronauts. Thus, the stars are going to be too faint to have captured. Totally makes sense.
Could be. It makes sense to me.
There's a lot of talk about shadows. And when I looked at that video, I mean, I guess the shadows could be inconsistent. I don't hold a lot of stake in that too much, only because shitty video, super old
Right, we're not talking
video.
about great video quality here.
Right, and I think that the terrain is very bumpy, and it's just... Think about a desert. Think about the beach. We're beach guys. We live right here.
Yeah.
How different, shadows are cast very differently when they hit dunes of sand and just the way they kind of move. And it will never look the same in any two nights either. So that was always interesting to me there too.
Yeah, I mean, look, unless you had somebody come on and sit here and really walk me through the shadows and made an argument as to why they believed that proved their case, I'm not taking shadows, as something that's going to be really heavily weighted on my decision about this.
Right. So
what was the thing with the... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to knock you off track. I know you have something you want to talk about.
Go.
What was the thing with the flag? Do you remember that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion that the flag was waving, and
That's one of the things that I remember,
was looking
right?
through the video clip. Yeah. I have a hard time reconciling that one too, because I couldn't find a good video that looked like the flag was waving in there. But that would be interesting too. That I think you can chalk up to a number of different things though too. Is it could have just been a bump, low gravity, again, assumingly the flag could have gotten hit and it just maybe takes a little longer for it to kind of bounce back and forth. Everything else from there is interesting though. 11 flag waving. I'm gonna see if I can find another video here.
I just remember that being one of the things that stuck out to me that that people have talked about in the past is something about the flag. And to your point, I believe it was the flag was waving, and I guess in a zero. I'm gonna sound so dumb if this is wrong. A zero oxygen environment, or where there should be no wind, essentially. Like how is that flag waving?
Right.
I know it was
how
something.
Is the flag waving?
Right. It was something in regards to that.
Yep. Okay, so I might have just gotten a video here. I'm gonna have to watch some ridiculous ad to get to it. I mean that again though. I think it was mostly in the plant, right? And so I think in the process of planting the flag, you're gonna swing this flag back and forth. It's gonna wave. It is what it is. I don't know that I'd really chalk that up.
That makes sense.
Here. Yeah. Okay, I've got it right here.
That makes perfect sense.
It's a little small here, but let's do this anyway. All right, let's pull this guy up right here. All right, so we've got this article right here. It's from express.uk here. Here, we're going to play this. So you can see the flag moving right there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's a little small,
but they're handling the flag,
There's definitely movement. They're handling the flag, right? And to me, it looks very stiff. Like it doesn't look like it's necessarily blowing.
Right.
It just, if that's a real flag, it's yeah, I feel like any movement can really knock that off course. So I don't hold a lot of weight into that.
Yeah, I guess that's
another interesting thing that kind of caught me off guard is...
What's that?
No, go.
No, what I was going to say was it's in that specific shot, it looked like the astronauts were handling the flag almost the entire time. And regardless of what kind of your environment you're in, I believe that that's going to cause movement, right? So, I mean,
I would be inclined to think so, yeah. Well, especially if you think, again, gravity's holding the flag up in that position. It's not like it's drooping down at all.
Right.
So I don't think the flag is necessarily a piece for me here.
Now, granted, if this was faked, you know, the people that faked it aren't dumb either, right? I'm sure somebody said, hey, man, that fucking flag isn't going to just droop down like it would if we were on Earth. We got to make this thing, you know
so
what I mean?
Like
make it out of cardboard.
Flag. Right.
Oh, starched it, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So,
well,
you know, there's two sides to every story.
So I've given that some thought too. And so that actually parlays perfectly or segues perfectly into what I was going to bring up is Hollywood. There's a lot of talk that Stanley Kubrick was behind all of this. Stanley Kubrick was a massive filmmaker. I mean, even to this day, he still holds a lot of weight in that regard. There's a quote that's attributed to him. And the quote is, "I've committed a major fraud on the American public, which I will explain in detail. With the cooperation of the U.S. government and NASA, we faked the moon landing. All moon landings were faked, and I was the one who filmed it all." Now, there is photos that suggest that this is also true. So I'm going to pull up those photos. I don't know if these photos are real either, but this is something I want to kind of delve into with you a little bit and see what do we find.
There's belief that this is all shot on like a soundstage in LA.
This is a soundstage right here, right?
Yeah.
Actually, there's belief that it was not shot in a soundstage in LA, but there's actually a lot of evidence that it was shot in Arizona. And I'm going to try to get to those as well.
Gotcha. That would make sense.
Here's the alleged photo of Stanley Kubrick, right? Here's some photos that are supposedly supporting this. This is him. Here's one of those cameras that we talked about. Now, this is a little smaller than what we were looking at, but it's still a pretty monstrous machine here, right, that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Here's a soundstage with the moon landing.
Wow.
Okay. Interesting.
Dude, could you imagine if it ever comes out that is authentic? That's real.
Look at this.
Dude.
It's a model.
Shut up.
Now, this could all be fake too.
100% it could, but just imagine that it's not.
Right. So that's what caught me off guard. I haven't been able to distinctly verify one way or another whether or not that's true. That quote itself is true. But
I was going to ask you that. That's a very interesting quote. I wonder where that came from, and that's wild.
Yeah, it's been rumored for a really long time. I don't know that we can make it true or false.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem to say it's. Some people say it's in a confession video. A lot of people seem to say it was BS. I don't know either way. But there's more of these types of images that you can see here, right? Again, these don't necessarily. Actually, these look a little AI-y to me. If I I can't zoom in much more than that.
You're the AI expert. Oh. You would know which better than myself.
I'm going to try to pull that guy up a lot more. Let's copy the image address. Let's slap that in there. Let's see if we can figure this guy out here. I'll see this one, his face looks a little blurred. Their faces look a little blurry to me, so that looks a little AI-y to me. You usually tell by the hands. Like, this guy looks very weird. Yeah, this one looks a little AI-y.
I was going to say, that dude's standing so weird.
Yeah. So this one might be a little scattered there, a little fake.
Dude, isn't it
wild? One, though, is
that my bad, I didn't mean to cut you off. Like, just so wild that we're in the time where, I mean, if I were to just kind of glance at those photos, I wouldn't think AI. You know what I mean? Like, I would, like, it's just so, like, and we're not saying they 100% are, but that's fucking nuts.
Yep. It's absolutely wild, man. It's absolutely wild.
It's insane.
All right, so now I'm going to jump into this, and we're tunneling down an interesting development in our lifetimes. All right, so what I brought up here, this is Whitsitt. What the heck is his first name? I don't remember what his first name is. In any case, this particular guy is a huge flat Earth conspiracy theorist, one of the biggest ones that are out there. So I know that's going to immediately turn a lot of people off when they listen to this, but bear with me here.
You know what, man? You know what I would say to those people? Like, you don't have to agree with his opinion. Whatever, just listen to it. Form your own opinion.
Nope.
Have fun.
Exactly. You do not have to agree with it. And this isn't, again, for or against the moon. I'm sorry, the flat Earth theory. This is something completely separate here. So what this guy, what I said earlier is that the crutch for me on flat Earth was the moon landing fake? Because if the moon landing was not faked, flat Earth is completely debunked. It's done because you've got plenty of evidence from there. But if it was, so they do a lot of independent research here. Again, whether it's true research or not, I don't know. But this is pulled from the CIA, and he says people claim the moon landing could not have been faked because they didn't have the technology to fake it back then. A declassified document from the CIA says otherwise. It discusses what is effectively the chroma key, which is the traveling map method, with an infrared camera in 1964, later released in 2013. So, not only did it exist, but it was being used, according to the CIA, after the patent was created in the 60s, in 1964. And here is a snippet of it, which literally says, among the equipment which drew attention, the new camera, Mir, with a mirror shutter, which is considerably lighter than the Mitchell, the line of cameras for wide format exposures, the series of camera lenses, light filters, combination photography by the traveling map method, which guarantees complete absence of outlines, equipments for demorphizing screen films, possibility of panoramic printers and printing, so on and so forth. Gets in a lot of technical specifications right here. Now, if you scroll down, he also puts a clip in the definition, which I just want to include, and we'll jump into your comments on that. The traveling mat is a special effect in film that allows a subject to be cut out of the background and placed on top of a different background without needing to rewind the film. Go.
The argument that they didn't have the technology to fake it back then just sounds so stupid to me. They've been making movies forever, dude. We're talking about the 1960s, like...
Right.
They didn't have the ability to build a soundstage and essentially shoot a movie in 1969. You're telling me they couldn't do that? That's bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the biggest movies of that particular period, you had the Planet of the Apes. What were they doing? They were dressing up in ape costumes, dancing around.
Right.
I think maybe the Space Odyssey, 2001 Space Odyssey was probably in that realm. The science fiction really wasn't that great, and so I think the argument there is honestly just the special effects weren't good enough for somebody jumping up and floating back down, because it looks like it's slow motion a little bit more.
I guess I could see that.
Right, but I also think that people tend to believe that they watched this in real time. That's not the case. If it was real time, so to speak, it was on a significant tape delay. I mean, even right now, when you communicate across the internet, there is a tape delay. You're just not necessarily processing it because processor speeds are so much faster and so forth.
Right.
So all things considered, it could have been done hours later. So I think the idea of somebody jumping up and down and floating back down to their feet, it's easily disproven because there's no way that was happening live. If it was live, of course, yeah, it's really hard to do that.
Makes sense.
That era,
right, I see what you're saying.
But if it's not live, the special effects come into there.
Well, look, I mean, if it was faked, it certainly wasn't live, right? So, I mean, they could have utilized any method that you could imagine to create that effect.
Right. I think that the piece of the chroma key, the reason that becomes relevant is because the filming techniques, being able to basically supplant the astronauts in front of, it's almost like a green screen technology.
Right.
And I know I'm
That's what I got from
butchering the description of this. Right. I think it's the way they're able to film aspects of this and then put it all together. So that lends to what you said about the soundstage, astronauts bouncing up on a soundstage, but them filming in the Arizona desert with a mountain range in the background. There are images, and I have been looking for them, and I cannot find them. And I specifically saved them earlier, or thought I did, and I must not have, of the Arizona desert, that the mountains of it are very, very similar to what you would have seen on the moon.
To the shots that we saw there. Again, okay, that's interesting.
Well, there's a word for that, and I keep pulling that word up, and I keep using it quite a bit on everything that I've been seeing on social media lately. Okay, I'm going to butcher how to pronounce this. It's called pareidolia.
Okay.
pareidolia. In any case,
Enlighten
it's
me.
the phenomenon where you see patterns such as faces or shapes, or any sort of random, they say vague stimuli like rocks or cloud formations or texture surfaces, and it's your brain's tendency to impose like a meaningful interpretation out of that.
Okay. Is this like the
The
man on the
layman's
moon
term of
type of
that,
thing? The face on the moon? Same kind of
face in
thing?
the moon,
The face
you
on
see a face in the
Mars?
clouds.
Right.
Right. It's seeing something that isn't there, and the reason I've been using that a lot is like you get the Charles painting that just came out. There's a whole bunch of other ones that come out where people are taking the Twitter logo, if you are the X logo, when you invert it and twist it and turn it backwards and put it together, and you do all like 50 different manipulations, and it looks like the Masonic symbol. And that's what I tend to think the desert could have been too. It's a desert. There's a lot of mountains out there. It's very easy to probably find one that looks like another mountain that was in a clip from the 1960s, if those clips are real. So I haven't held a lot of stake in that, but I thought that was an interesting one to have
It
perspective
is.
on.
You know what I think, right? And I don't know. I kind of feel a little stuck on this whole like, hey, they didn't have the ability to produce that video. They couldn't have faked it back then.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me what I thought about the video that you showed me, and what did I say? I said it looks like shit. Okay, so right, that's what I said. I said it looks like shit. So you're gonna tell me they didn't have the ability to take shitty video? And I get what you're saying about the I almost said aliens, about the astronauts slowly coming down and kind of replicating what it would be like to be in zero gravity or something like that. That makes sense. I get that. I still think that they look, dude. If you're talking about the fact that you have the United States government who's funding this, right? You're talking about the fact that you have essentially a limitless budget, right? And limitless manpower, if that's the case, right? So they could have figured some shit out if they really wanted to, dude. I don't know. I just find it hard to believe that they couldn't take some shitty video.
I'm going to show you another one here. And this one's an interesting one just because of the reaction on it.
We support Exelon.
Okay. Can you see that in the back? Oh, that's actually a terrible version of that video.
I was gonna say, dude, what is that?
There we go. Why are they completely distorting the audio? Okay, so that's Buzz Aldrin right back there.
Yeah.
And what this person is asking, and since they destroyed the audio, is he's at this point heckling Buzz Aldrin, and he's chasing him down about the moon landing. And he's asking if it was faked. It was fake. Was it faked? And Buzz Aldrin just cocks back and knocks him. And this is after, within the video. I'll find a better one, I'll patch it into our video later. But within the video, he's like tailing this guy for a while. Buzz Aldrin's kind of tailing him for a little bit, and he gets him as soon as he walks out, starts heckling him, and Aldrin's like visibly pissed. Now, I'm sure he's been hearing this literally since the 1960s, or I guess 1970 by the time at that point, rounding up.
Right.
This has been fake. What's going on? And maybe that bothers him. But do you think it'd bother him that much? They knocked the guy in the jaw?
I don't know.
Is it an insult to your
I was going to say, is it
achievements,
an insult to
or is it
you?
you're just frustrated of having to mask it? Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It could be. It is interesting that the guy just fucking cold cocked him like that. I didn't know Buzz Aldrin did that. That was pretty cool.
Think of your greatest accomplishment, and then somebody keeps saying to you that never happened, or no, you didn't really do that. You didn't really win.
Right. Would
that piss you off enough to where you're just like, all right, I'm going to knock this guy in the face?
I don't know if I'm going to physically strike somebody because of it. I think that's a little bit extreme. To your point, I mean, I could see him becoming irritated if he's constantly posed with these hecklers and these questions decade after decade. I mean, I don't know when that video was from. It didn't look like it was that old. So I'm going to assume he's been, asked that question many, many times over his lifetime. Anybody can get irritated.
I think it was relatively recently. I don't know how recently, but
it didn't look super old. I don't think it was from the 80s. Let's put it that way. It wasn't 20 years after the moon landing happened.
Right.
It was probably 50 years later. So, point being, if this guy was being badgered for 50 years after landing on the moon, possibly, he just got fed up. I don't know. It is interesting, though.
This has been like the hardest part for me about this whole topic too, is that I still don't know. Like, I'm coming into this and there are holes in the story, but there are not, at least for me, there's not enough evidence at this stage that I'm going to say yes or no, it's
No,
true or
I'm
it's
very
false.
lukewarm on it.
Right? I'm going to give you something else here. And I feel like this one could potentially change your mind.
I think I know.
And this to me is probably outside of the cameras, which the camera thing is kind of telling to me, could potentially be the biggest skeleton key of all of it.
Right.
Okay, so moon landing. We all know the context of it, right? It happens in the middle of the Cold War. Russia's already gearing up to go to the moon. A lot of turmoil between the U.S. and Russia, who's more technologically advanced, and we've got the Cuban Missile Crisis going on. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, and we're on the brink of war at any point. That's the whole premise of the Cold War, and so the idea of beating Russia to the moon becomes a technical superiority thing, or technology superiority thing.
It's funny. I was just going to mention haven't talked about the premise of this theory and why the U.S. would have faked it. But to your point, that's exactly it. You nailed it. We were in the middle of the Cold War.
Well, that becomes it.
Right. We were in the middle of the Cold War. It was a race against the Soviet Union at that point, and we wanted to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's as simple as that.
That's it. So now you achieve what I think we could both say is one of the greatest feats of mankind. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Infamous quote. What do you think happens to all of the documentation about that landing, all of the original video? What happens with that if you're NASA?
What happens if you are NASA? I mean, I would guess that
you work at NASA, you put together all this video, you film it. Right.
It should be yours. It should be NASA's property. I mean, you should archive it. You should, it should be kept and preserved for generations to come and studied and something to be celebrated. Is what I would imagine.
For all intents and purposes, as far as anybody knows, all of the original telemetry data, the high quality video recordings, all of it is either missing or destroyed. All of it. You cannot write a FOIA request for it. There has been no leaks on it. And all of the information that is out there, now again, this can't be validated because the US government does keep things under wraps and they don't tell us everything. But as far as anybody can prove, 100% of all of that original data is gone. It's missing. And so when you watch all of the moon landing videos, it's always chopped up. And that's why you can never, even that 3-hour long one, it's bits and pieces. And it's probably one of the longer form ones you have, but you never see them actually hit the surface in that video. You never see, when they're moving the cameras around and setting them up. Not there. You never see them do a lot of things there, right? It's piecemeal. But the original recordings that would presumably be high quality, it's put on film at that point. It could probably be remastered today and be crystal clear. They've done that with tons of old movies. My father used to be a big old movie watcher. I love seeing some of those old things that I watched as a kid now remastered in HD. It's still a little crappy, you know how they are, but
yeah, comparatively,
all of it's gone.
Yeah. Now you're talking my language. So why is it that whenever there's something that is super fucking important or monumental that people are going to ask questions about, it just disappears? It just disappears.
And not just something that people are going to ask questions about or monumental, but again, the greatest scientific achievement in the history of mankind, to our knowledge at that point.
That's wild.
Disappeared.
That is wild.
So that was pretty telling to me too, and I've heard that tossed around before. And I did a little more research on that to kind of validate that is in fact what we're seeing out there is that it's just gone. It's been vanished. And for those that are not familiar, the telemetry data is effectively what that is like
I wrote that shit down. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, so it's sensors and measurements. Effectively, when you're landing on there, you're all the gadgets that are going to be within the spacecraft that's going to approximate how you're landing, your speed, your landing, any data that they collected from the surface. I assume they didn't just go there, dance around for a little bit, get up and leave. They probably took some samples. 100% of everything is gone. there is another theory, and this one is really, really hard for me to find. And I'll try it again while we're live here. That the reason that all of that information is gone is not because the moon landing is faked, but because why?
I have absolutely no idea why.
Because they found some sort of structure or aliens living on the moon.
Oh, they found some shit up there, boy. Okay.
So there is Apollo 11's third astronaut. There it is. Let me see if I can find. Man.
I feel like I have heard about that. I feel like that is now ringing a bell in my subconscious.
I don't remember exactly who it was, and that's what I'm struggling to find it. One of the astronauts supposedly, because again the feeds are not live; they're cut. Supposedly, in some of the original audio, not the original ones, whatever repeated audio logs that are out there, the radio transmissions, there's a cutoff right before somebody says, one of the astronauts says, I want to say it was Buzz Aldrin, but I don't think it was. Charles Duke.
Okay.
He was the lunar module pilot, is what I'm reading. Oh no, it's different Apollo mission. Yeah, I don't know what the astronaut name is off the top of my head, but in any case, as the story goes, the astronaut, when they land there, they're conveying back to NASA, letting them know we're down, blah, blah, blah. And supposedly they start saying, we're not alone here, or we're not the only ones here, or something to that effect. And then the feed is kind of cut off in the midst of saying that. So you never really hear anything, and it kind of picks up afterwards.
Yeah.
Again, it lends credence to the fact that, this was not on the televised piece. This is actually just on the radio communications, which is completely separate. And that is now just, second, third hand at this point. So, some speculation there. I know we're big alien guys.
That's more fun.
The alien theory.
That's way more fun than Stanley Kubrick filming some stuff in Arizona.
I go back and forth on that too. Is like, I completely and utterly understand why we would have faked it. Right.
It makes sense.
You want to beat the Russians.
Sure.
You got to establish dominance. How many times did we go back after? How many times have we been back to the moon since then?
I genuinely don't know. I think it's only been a handful of times, right? And it's been a super long time since.
Been to the moon. Been 140 missions to the moon.
Really? There's that many?
And pretty much all. Well, they're not all like people walking.
I was going to say, there's no way there's been that many actual lunar landings.
A lot of them are landers.
Right.
So there's only 6 missions landed humans on the moon.
Okay,
beginning
that
with
makes
Apollo
more sense.
7. I'm sorry, Apollo 11. Apollo 13 obviously had a malfunction and that didn't work out. Yeah, Apollo 17.
One of them had a real challenge.
Mission. Yeah, so, and then that was it. It kind of ended off in the 70s. So, what'd you say?
Said one of them had a real challenge.
Had a real challenge. Oh gosh, different spaceship. That's the fascinating part, is our technology advanced so rapidly, almost out of nowhere at that particular period. And then all of a sudden it kind of stalled out. And again, it ran its 10-year course or whatnot, but it completely stalled out. And, the speculation as it's told is that all of these moon landings were faked and they kept doing it to keep up the image of it. Eventually, the Russians got capabilities to go into space. The Chinese got it. Everyone was flying it through. India is doing it now. They're flying into space. So I don't know. I mean, I get being the first one up there, but then that begs the question, like, do you think we ever got there? If we didn't get there the first time, did we get there the second,
did we
the
ever
third,
actually get there?
10th?
Right.
Right. And then
it is kind of weird, right, that it stopped in, the 70s? And if you think about how far we've come in terms of technology from the 70s to today, right? I mean, we're a much more sophisticated civilization, right, as a whole. Our science has grown so much. You'd think that there'd be so much more that we could learn from going back there today, or at least in recent times, not 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Right.
Why haven't we gone back?
Right.
And look, maybe there's a very easy explanation of, dude, it's a rock. There's not that much to know. I don't know. Maybe it's that dumb.
True.
Maybe it's that dumb. It's a fucking rock. Like, why are we going to spend all this money to go back up there? Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But you'd think that we'd be able to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, there's a couple schools of thoughts on that. One, Elon Musk actually believes that the moon is the hub for us to get to Mars. You set up a base on the moon, and you can basically wait in the right orbit and catapult off the moon and and then head out to Mars. It'd just be like a not an intermediary, but I guess a landing spot to
Like a
kind of get yourself
layover.
situated, like a layover right there on the moon, and kind of get yourself geared up.
There you go. No good drinks there though,
Um,
and the food's pretty shitty
what's
from what I
that?
hear. I said no great drinks, and the food tastes like shit.
I think another reason you'd probably want to be there, yes, it's a rock, but I can't imagine there's not something that could be mined out that way, whether it's rocks on the surface of the moon itself or asteroids. And maybe you use that as a launching pad to go for asteroids. Maybe there's something you can leverage there. Maybe it's just too difficult to set up some sort of a livable habitat there too. Maybe it's as simple as that, like you kind of alluded to.
Yeah.
The other school of thought is that we have gone back and we continue to go back, and that there is potentially bases set up on the moon. Allegedly, the Russians and the Chinese have both been up there, which is to say that they didn't set something up there. What's to say
Plausible.
we don't have something up there?
Yeah.
And then that this is serving now some sort of military base. Maybe it's communicating with extraterrestrial life. Maybe it's just to monitor our enemies. Maybe there is some other infinite resource that we don't have access to on Earth that we need, and that we're just sort of staking our claim to it. Or maybe, just maybe, there are actually aliens there, or there is some possibility that there is, some ancient civilization there.
That would be cool as shit.
know.
Imagine the Egyptians are up there, dude.
The Egyptians.
Imagine the Egyptians are up there. I'm calling it. If it's any ancient civilization, the Egyptians are up there. Not the dynastic
So-
ones, but the older ones.
So,
I'm gonna
so
get
you
so many
say
people
that.
pissed off at me for saying that.
Another theory about the moon, because it is unique in its form, and a lot of other planets do have moons, but ours is just for whatever reason happens to be a little more unique. There's a theory that the moon is actually hollow. It's a hollow moon theory.
Yes, I have heard that before.
Right. And that could be any number of things. Obviously, there's the hollow Earth theory that's talking about life under Earth. I don't think it's necessarily the same thing. But there's thought that the moon could have, or potentially is, some sort of an ancient civilization's spacecraft or something, or it's maybe just a piece of something else, and it kind of got caught in Earth's orbit, maybe intentionally, maybe accidentally. Perhaps it was that ancient civilization that was steering our ancient ancestors, like the Egyptians, and that they were feeding the technology, and for whatever reason they had died off, or maybe it was a civilization beyond that. But they talk about a lot of the seismic experiments that were conducted during the Apollo missions. I guess it like rang like a bell. I guess suggesting
I've
that it
heard
was
that
hollow
before.
or
Yep,
dense
yep,
material.
yep.
Right, I've heard that before too, and I don't know enough about the experiments to really speak much on that. And then again, it's got to go back to the idea of, do you believe in the moon landings? And maybe if they were on the sound stage and they did these seismic experiments as maybe just a facetious way to make it look like they were actually doing something,
Yeah.
they hit the stage, and the stage is what run because they're on a wooden plank. Who
Right,
knows?
right. I heard it was
Right.
made out of cheese. Isn't that in like a kid's book or some shit like that?
Made I think it was in the cartoon. Yeah,
Yeah, some of it was
Maybe
made out of
Peanuts,
cheese.
they put it out there. Yep. They talk about the density in the composition, not the competition. The density is lower that of Earth, so they suggest that's hollow spaces within the moon. I don't know if that does anything. And then you got the usual suspects, the unusual surface features, and its perfect circular orbit and rotation, and this is actually one that now I'm reading it actually makes an interesting sense, is that the face of the moon always faces the Earth. We always see one side, which I actually didn't even realize that until I read that right there. So that's actually pretty fascinating to me. I guess, within Earth's orbit makes sense. The Earth's always spinning, but the
Right.
moon kind of remains stationary. So what is on the dark side of the moon, if anything?
Right. And it's funny,
and why
when you
would
said
that
that
actually be?
there could be bases, right, on the moon, my first thought was, well, dude, we could see the moon pretty well, right? I mean, there are some Samsung Galaxy cameras or what are like the Pixel Pros that can like zoom in and you get these like incredibly crazy like close-up shots of the moon. And I'm like, wouldn't you just be able to see some stuff that's up on the moon? But to your point, we're only seeing that one side, if you will, of the moon at all times. We're never seeing that dark side of the moon. Call back to Pink Floyd.
Right,
maybe.
right.
So who knows what the hell's over there? It's gonna be cold as shit up there, though.
Oh man. Oh God. Well, no. I mean, wouldn't it?
No, but on the dark side,
dark
though.
the moon face the sun?
Or is it just dark
Dark
to
face the
us?
sun?
Is that just dark to
Is
us?
it just dark to
I don't know.
us?
We're
Yeah,
getting
I'm
we're
not
getting
really
to
sure.
we're gonna sound so dumb now. I don't know. We'll stop. All right, cut it.
Yeah. Well, we never told
Move
you
on.
to be scientists or
Move on.
astronauts, so we're just gonna we're gonna stick where we know. Yeah, man. It's one that I spend so much time, and I'm pausing a lot. So the people that are listening, you're seeing. I'm actually trying to like rack my brain on it because, right, like to me, it's something so pivotal in our life, and there's so much else that changes with whether or not this is true.
Yeah.
One thing that, again, I'm going to lend this to the flat earth theorists and listening to a lot of what they had to say that struck me, and I never realized this is true, is that there is no photo of Earth. Do you know that?
I've heard that before, but why do people say that? I know that that's a phrase.
Is no photo of Earth as a globe. There's none that exist in its entirety.
Sure.
No unaltered photo. I take that back. No unaltered
photo. Okay.
And NASA will say on their own website, you can actually go there and look, that every photo that they have is stitched together. And they have cameras up there and whatnot, and it's taking shots of the Earth from where it sees it, and then it stitches together, and it kind of gives the impression of the globe.
Makes sense.
And so if the moon landing is faked, that then begs into question, did we ever go to space? Do we ever go to space? Is our idea of space just, low orbit?
Right.
And maybe we're not actually...
So where are satellites low orbit? Is that where satellites are? I would imagine they're in low orbit, right?
Satellites technically within our atmosphere. Right. Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
So is that where the photos of Earth are coming from? Are they all from satellites?
It could just be a little bit beyond that.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin was his space company. They're low orbit flights. Now, where that lands you still certainly looks like space, because you're still so high up. You're sort of kind of just breaching outside of the atmosphere.
I remember Elon talking about this. I think it was on Rogan. It was probably years ago, and he was explaining about how most of these flights into low orbit are like just barely above the Earth's atmosphere. Like you're just penetrating it, and you're right there, dude. Like you're basically just like a really high airplane.
Right. That's crazy. It's
I'm paraphrasing Elon. That's not exactly what you said,
right.
but it was something to that effect.
And I think and I tend to believe or wonder if a lot of those photos that are being taken are just being taken from those satellites from NASA, and that's why they're putting them together. But you can actually, and I've done it in the past before, I'm not going to do it now, it's going to take me forever, but you can actually go and you can look on their website, and they show pictures of it, and they say that these are edited, but these are not the original pictures.
That's wild. Dude.
So something interesting to think of there, and that's what puts it into perspective me, and that's why I sit and I kind of rack my brain a lot about it, because I kind of don't want to believe that we haven't been there.
Yeah,
because that then jeopardizes, our plausibility of going back somewhere else.
Sure.
And I know we have the International Space Station. I know that's probably just above Earth, but where the International Space Station is to where the moon is quite a bit of a distance. So just because we have an International Space Station doesn't necessarily validate that we've been to the moon.
Right. Exactly. We're talking about two completely different things. Essentially,
right?
You kind of lump them together because they're both space travel, but one's going way further.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, go run a mile, now go run a marathon.
Right. Just because I love photos here, we're going to go ahead and pull this one up. So this is just a little bit of a perspective right here. So the ISS is 400 kilometers from Earth. Mm-hmm. The moon is 384,000 kilometers.
I mean, that's just so much further.
So much further. And so what were we just talking about with regards to the distance, in the small nuanced measurements in low orbit, right? Mm-hmm. It's just above the Earth's atmosphere, which, I mean, look where the ISS is, right? It's still within there, but it's still it's far from us, but it's still so far from the ISS. It's so much further than even where the moon is. I kind of wish this picture was over here, but if you looked at this picture, I mean, it'd barely be at the tip of that arrow.
Yeah, well, I would just do the math, right? What you say, 400 kilometers to almost 400,000? I mean, that's a tremendous difference.
384,000. I mean, in fact, it's 384,400 kilometers. So it is 384,000 kilometers further.
Yeah. That's
wild. yeah, just an interesting little tidbit there. But it does change things. It does
Yeah.
change things a lot, and that's why, yeah, it's so hard for me to reconcile either way. How do you feel kind of coming out of this? Where if you had to, not that we deep dove into too much of the evidence, but if you had to kind of put a stamp on it right now, if you had to summarize your elevator pitch,
All right, so
we
I'm
go?
going to give you an answer, but then I'm going to pose a question.
Okay, I like
I think I'm
questions.
still 50-50, right? I think there's a lot of good evidence as to. I think the motive, to me, still remains probably. A motive isn't evidence. I get that. But the motive as to why we would have faked the moon landing, to me, is so clear that any bit of evidence that you come up with, I go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, I get why we would go to those great lengths to do that, right? Like, from the 60s
Right.
to 1990, right? Like, it was like, that was the number one thing, was defeat Russia, right? Like, that's all it was about, or the Soviet Union. So I
Right.
completely
Right.
understand
And
that.
there's an obsession to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%.
If you think about the war, right?
Yeah.
What was the whole premise of the war? Go steal everybody's scientists and
Yeah.
try to see who advance technologically first. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
So to me, when you take the motive and then you add in some of the evidence, especially some of the cool stuff that we talked about today, I mean, man, dude, if those photos of Stanley Kubrick, I feel like I butcher his name. Is it Kubrick? Kubrick. Stanley
yeah.
Kubrick. If those photos of him are real on that soundstage, dude, I mean, that's the smoking gun right there. In any event, there's some really interesting pieces of evidence to point to it potentially being faked, which is really cool. But I think we also talked about a lot of things that you and I both agreed, like, it doesn't really do it for me. So I
Right.
think I'm all 50-50, or I'm still 50-50 on it. Now, my question for you. It's not a monumental question.
Ready.
I'll get too excited. I feel like it was you and I that talked about this recently. Didn't we watch a video, okay, of one of the astronauts who was on, I want to say it was a late night show. He was being interviewed, and the host, don't remember who it was, said something to the effect of, "Oh, I remember watching you," and he cut him off. He goes, "No, you didn't watch me. That didn't happen. There was no video. What
Yes.
you watched was a recording." And he was kind of taken back. He was like, "No, but like all of America saw you. Like we watched it." He goes, "Nope, you didn't. You
Yep.
listened to us on the radio, but what you watched was a recording. You didn't actually watch us do that." And I guess kind of thinking back on it, and you might remember that's what I'm talking about. Clearly, you do by your reaction
remember
right
exactly.
now. You
Yeah.
might be able
We'll
to
put
tell
that
me
in
who
post.
the astronaut was and what show it was. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I have 3 kids and I sleep like 4 hours a night, so I can't remember stuff like that. In any event, thinking back on it, maybe he's saying like, yeah, it was a delayed feed, so you didn't actually see it at that point in time. Maybe that's what he meant. But to me, it was kind of like a, what's he mean by that? That's pretty interesting.
Yep. I'm going to find that interview because I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's pretty telling. And I'm sure it's probably taken out of context from what we saw.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of ways to interpret that too. So we'll have to go back and look at that. But I'll patch that into the end of this interview too, just so people can kind of surmise themselves. We can only add little clips in here before we get hit with a copyright strike. So
I was gonna say, dude, I was gonna bring that up before when you were bringing up stuff up on YouTube. I'm like, wait a minute though, but if we're on Spotify, can we pull up shit on YouTube? I don't know. We're gonna get in trouble at some point. We'll figure it out.
we could do whatever. Yeah, you just got to. You can't float full clips in there. You get a creative license for some of the stuff.
We'll
but,
figure it out.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one to me. I think that if I had to put money down on it, I think we've been to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we were there in 1969. I don't think we landed with Apollo 11. And I think that's potentially what pisses off Buzz Aldrin when people ask about it, is because he is going to go down in infamy for landing on the moon, but knowing that he did not and that it was faked.
Could you imagine that? Imagine living with
right.
that for your life, for the rest of your
you are
life.
a hero, but you're a false idol.
I mean, dude, he was a
And
rock
I think
star.
that-
He was a rock star in the 60s,
still is.
70s,
And still is in
100%.
all
But I
counts and
mean,
purposes.
yeah. I mean, that guy's never paid for a drink in his life.
Right. And I think that eventually we made it there. I don't know if the Apollo missions were that eventually or not. I think it's plausible. But I do think that there's a high percentage chance that we have been back. I just don't know that we know about it. And I'm not saying that with any degree of certainty, but I find it less plausible that our government hemorrhages billions of dollars a year into mysterious weapons defenses, and we just stopped going to outer space in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And then they shuttered NASA, and then they brought it back, and all this other stuff. It's just
Too many things don't
to
add
me,
up.
whenever the government shutters one program, if we've learned one thing from this program, what happens when they shutter one program?
They don't ever actually shutter it. It generally goes on much longer than they tell you about.
Right.
MK Ultra.
And, I mean, MK Ultra, right? How many names did that have before they really shuttered it, or maybe moved on to something else that we might not even know about? And the same thing was with like Project Blue Book and all of the investigations into UFOs. Is they created multiple programs and just kept shuttering them, and so they changed the acronyms as well along the way.
Right.
So they always had plausible deniability of, oh no, we definitely didn't do that. But that's what I'm going to probably stick with. I do think that if we did go to the moon at that particular time and we went up there, maybe we landed, maybe we didn't. I do think that there is a chance that if we went up there, the footage was completely filmed, and maybe the footage was filmed separately. And here's another theory I'll just throw out there, just because I'm kind of like piecemealing this together here. What if we did make it to the moon, and that radio transmission, because that's all we were hearing at the particular time, that radio transmission was accurate, and they saw somebody or something else there, okay? Now you need to report back to the American people what happened.
Right.
And so maybe what actually happened is they did call Stanley Kubrick, and they did bring him into a soundstage, and they did record this moon landing.
Yeah.
And then that's what they put out to everybody. Moon landing.
I guess we would have had to have landed much earlier than I couldn't tell you the date. I don't know what the date. I don't know. It was 1969. I don't know what the date was.
Even if we did, the video doesn't come out right away.
I guess you're right. I don't know, when did that video come out? I have no idea. That's
comparatively speaking. Well, I'm just going to ask our old friend AI, and we're going to see. Okay. When did the moon landing
footage?
I don't think it was at the exact same time, and if that is the case, I don't know. The video footage of the first moon landing was broadcast live on July 20th, 1969. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know.
Whatever, dude.
First moon landing was on July 27th.
Processing new ideas and information in real time on video.
Well, see, that doesn't make sense to me, because how are you broadcasting that feedback from the moon? And that goes back to what we talked about the video footage before. How did you broadcast that video footage? It's on the moon. There's no way you're transmitting that. We have a hard time transmitting from coast to coast.
Yeah.
Let alone across the world. You're not getting video feeds, especially at that era when, you got radio waves that are not crossing the world. You're transmitting live video. That doesn't add up to me.
Dude, why can I not get there? I mean, we live in southern central Jersey. Dude, I remember when I moved down to this area, I couldn't get Hot 97 in New York City. Right? I can't get that radio station. But you're telling me you can broadcast video from the moon? Right. That's in 1969. Right. In 1969.
Right.
We know now that I could, click a button and I can send something literally around the entire Earth. Okay, that's not amazing. I mean, it is actually amazing. It's wild that we could do that, right? But it's commonplace.
Different, though.
Right, and the way that it works is different. The way that it works is different, right.
That signal is not transmitting wirelessly. Sure. It's going through wires.
Right.
There are cables underneath the ocean that connect the Americas to Europe.
Yeah.
That's not just going in the airwaves. So, I mean, 5G, of course, is, there are new advancements in it, but it's so elementary at this stage. But,
right, and this is 2024, not 1969, baby.
Right. So my inclination is, I mean, again, I'm going to lean back to, even if it was real, we're on a major delay here. They must have went and then they broadcast it live, and it's such a delay. But if that is the case, perhaps they did find something there and they quickly recorded something, or perhaps they recorded it in advance just in case shit hit the fan.
I was just going to say, what if they said, yo, we're going to record this audio, we're going to record the video, And we're getting to that fucking moon no matter what, as far as anybody else knows. You know what I mean?
One
like,
way or
we're
another.
not failing.
Yep.
As far as everybody else is concerned, we're landing on the moon today,
Right.
baby. Maybe that was it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we actually did
love
get
to-
there, and it's just the footage and the audio, or one or the other, happen to be something pre-recorded.
I would love to find any semblance of that original audio in as much of its entirety as possible in the original video, and try to line it up as much as possible and see if it makes sense in context.
Yeah.
You know, is somebody jumping up and like saying, "Oh yeah, I'm walking around on the moon," like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
something crazy like that. Like, usually if you're bouncing around, you're probably not talking so fluidly. Maybe your voice is going to be a little distorted. I'd love to do that. Or if there's somebody out there that wants to do that for us, that would be much better.
Dude, that'd be awesome.
But
yeah, we research a lot of stuff.
see, now we just went a whole hour and my perspective's changed again. So
It's wild when we talk
back
about
and
stuff
forth
and
like
think
3 or
about
4 times.
things.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one to me. But
You know
I
what?
think that's a good place.
No matter
Yeah.
what,
Go.
it's fun. And that's why
It's fun.
we like this stuff, because it's fun.
That is the enjoyment of it. But I think that's as good a place as any to call this in and wrap it up.
Let's go.
So I can see you're fired up and ready to travel to the moon here.
I'm ready to go upstairs and another beverage.
As we bring, yeah, mine's tapped a little bit too, but that's what cocktails and conspiracies are for. It actually tempers our cocktailing a little bit here.
It
We're not
does.
pounding them so fast.
Exactly.
As we bring tonight's exploration of the moon landing conspiracy to a close, we have journeyed through the shadows of doubt and the corridors of skepticism, uncovering the arguments that challenge one of humanity's greatest achievements. From photographic anomalies to alleged technical impossibilities, the debate over if we truly step foot on the lunar surface continues to ignite imaginations and provoke thought. Whether you believe the moon landings were a monumental truth or a masterful illusion, the questions we've raised tonight hopefully remind us that history is often written by those who dare to dream and sometimes who dare to deceive. Thank you for joining us on this captivating journey through one of the most enduring conspiracy theories of our time. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And keep questioning, keep investigating, and remember that the truth is out there waiting to be discovered. Until next time, stay curious and keep looking up. We are the Conspiracy Realists.